Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Monday, October 26th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. Week one of the 2020 Big Ten football schedule is in the books. Ohio State beat Nebraska 52-17 to open the season. The game against Michigan, 47 days away, looking maybe a little bigger than it did last time we spoke. Michigan looked pretty good against a slightly shorthanded Minnesota team, but looked pretty good nonetheless. My guest today is Buckeye Scoop recruiting analyst Marc Givler. We are going to be talking about the Ohio State-Nebraska game in just a few minutes, but I wanted to start with this weekend's big recruiting event, the Buckeye Bash. With no official visits allowed, this weekend's event might be the closest Ohio State gets to a major recruiting event for the class of 2021. And Marc was the only reporter there in person with all the recruits with a front row seat. So Marc, tell who other than you was there and what was that event like?
Yeah, it was about a dozen of the commits. Derrick Davis Jr., obviously top 100 safety out of Gateway, just outside of Pittsburgh, was there. That was probably the big name to watch just because he's obviously uncommitted and has an announcement here on November 7th. And a lot of the parents were able to kind of hang out. And so it was interesting. It was just they were all watching the game over at Buffalo Wild Wings there by campus and left I don't know, towards the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter, they took off and wanted to do a drive by the stadium and go kind of check out some of the stuff around campus as the game was kind of out of control at that point. And, everyone's having a good time. Nothing crazy to report as far as any drama or anything like that. Just guys watching the game, having a good time, hanging out, laughing and enjoying the game.
There are not very many holes left to fill for this class for Ohio State. So how big a deal was it that someone like Derrick Davis got to spend time with all of the Ohio State commits? And also Trevion Henderson, very, very highly ranked running back recruit, commit to Ohio State, had never been to Columbus. How big a deal was it for him to be in Columbus and be around these guys as well?
Yeah, first with Davis, he's been to Ohio State a million times. And, the interesting thing about this was initially he was going to be here and Kyle McCord was not going to be here because Kyle had a game scheduled on Saturday night. Well, that game got canceled. So Kyle hopped on a flight real quick to get in here. And those two, of all the Ohio State commits, Kyle's the guy Derrick probably talks to the most. So that was kind of an extra added layer of comfortability there, I guess. But it was good for him to kind of connect with some of the other guys. Everything seemed going well on that front. With Trevion Henderson, there's been no concern. I mean, there's been no real reason for concern there. He has been really all in. I mean, he recruits other players. He's in constant communication with both the coaches and the other commits. He's really, been one of the leaders of the class. So there wasn't any concern, but it isn't, it does probably ease some feelings of like, hey, I've never actually been to this place and I'm about to, start my football career there in a few months. So I think that, it's a nice cherry on top to make sure that everything just continues to go smoothly there. He seemed to be having a great time. Him and Tyleik Williams, Virginia guys were kind of going back and forth a little bit. So they were having fun. Everything looked as it should, as you'd expect. Everyone was getting along great and it just seems like a really tight group.
Derrick Davis is announcing his decision relatively soon. I think it's a little over a week from now. Did the Buckeye recruits do enough that you think he's going to be ultimately in this class, commit to Ohio State?
Yeah, I mean, I've had them in the lead really since the spring. I think there's a comfort level he has with some of the guys in the class that maybe he doesn't have at the other schools. I think it got a little strange maybe over the summer. We couldn't visit anywhere. I know he wanted to do all his visits. Ohio State took several defensive backs at that point, but I still would keep my pick on Ohio State right now. I know I'm in the minority on that. I know that's a major majority opinion is Penn State. I think Ohio State's in a pretty solid spot right now, and we'll see what happens here in the next couple weeks. I don't know what he's going to do next weekend. He's talking about maybe going to LSU, and they don't even have a home game next weekend. But he's talking about just swinging by. He's never been there, and I don't think a Jaden Woodby situation is going to arise here, but the one funny thing about this is similarly to how Jaden was a big Florida State fan kind of growing up, and that was kind of like a school he always kind of thought about playing at. LSU is kind of that for Derrick, and he's never been there, and it's a very similar type of deal with that. But Derrick's much more reserved, much more I think thorough, less likely to do a knee jerk thing with LSU. So I don't think that's going to happen as far as like a surprise like that. But I do think it's Ohio State or Penn State. But that's something kind of maybe interesting for next weekend to see if he shows up there and checks out LSU. But yeah, I think if I had to pick today, I would keep my pick on Ohio State, knowing full well I'm kind of going against the grain there, and we'll see if I look stupid here in a couple weeks.
The news was not as good with Tristan Lee, the 5-star offensive tackle from Virginia. I mean, you guys have always thought he was something of a long shot, and he was supposedly going to be coming this weekend, and it was like, okay, so maybe they have a puncher's chance. He did not show up. Did you talk to the guys about why he didn't end up making that trip and what that might mean for his whatever small chance they had with him before?
Yeah, so I guess his mom was going to bring him, and she was under the weather, I believe. I'm not, I don't want to break down, his excuse. I'm sure it's valid. I don't want to question. I'm not going to question his, their honesty on that. I would imagine that's the case. I would imagine that it wasn't just my dog ate my homework type of thing. I do believe them. There's no reason not to. I think they're running third. I thought they were running third a month ago, a week ago, today. I think it's going to be LSU. And if it's going to be kind of a surprise, I think it's going to be Oklahoma. I don't think Ohio State's the surprise pick. I think it would be Oklahoma that would be ahead of them for that. Could this weekend have made a difference? I don't know. I tend to, I kind of sound like a broken record on this. I tend to believe that the kids, when they show up to these things, I think it shows more of what they are thinking at that time than it does in terms of making a difference and swaying things. I think the kids that show up to these things are already super serious about these schools, or they wouldn't be showing up to a non-event in terms of being able to talk to the coaches and, seeing the game or interacting with the players or doing any of that stuff. So if you're showing up just to hang out with the other commits, I think that kind of is telling in and of itself there. Tristan's been a little different with that, though, because he has been going around the country to a couple of these different ones. So, maybe they could have, maybe something would have clicked there. I don't know. I just don't think they're getting him. And and that's fine. I mean, they've got three good players right now, and they're going to try and get a fourth here, and we'll see what happens.
All right, that'll take care of the Buckeye Bash for now. Let's talk about the game. It definitely was not perfect, but the Buckeyes ended up winning by 5 touchdowns against a decent opponent, which there are about 129 other FBS teams that would probably take that pretty happily during any given weekend. You actually wrote a great column after the game with 10 observations about what you saw. Let's kind of run through a couple of those. Nebraska obviously got off to a very fast start on offense. 4 plays into the game, they'd gone 75 yards. Ohio State's down 7-0, and everyone's kind of going, that was not a great start to the season. How do you think the Buckeyes responded to that?
I mean, I thought they responded well. I mean, look, maybe I'm going to look dumb on this in a month or two. I think Nebraska's got one of the better offenses in the Big Ten. They have 2 quarterbacks that can hurt you with their legs, that they can put on the field together. They've got a smart offensive coach in Scott Frost. He's an offensive guy. They had a lot of time to put some tricks in there. They've got some speed at the skill positions, and they've got a veteran offensive line. I think that's a pretty good offense. I'm not saying Nebraska's going to win, 7 or 8 games, but I think their offense is going to be good. You didn't, how much hitting did Ohio State do the last 6 months? Probably not very much. It's a weird way to start the season when you don't get a tune-up against Akron. You don't get a tune-up against, FIU or something like that. You're playing a legitimate team with some speed, with a smart offensive coach. I expected there to be some hiccups. I think the exact word I used was hiccups in a kind of a preview stuff I was writing. And I expected I actually thought Nebraska would get into the mid-20s in points, and they didn't get there. So, yeah, there were some poor angles taken. There was some sloppy play there. A few things. Certainly plenty of stuff to evaluate here this week for the coaches to coach these guys up, which is always good. You can win by 35 and still have a lot to work on. So, I thought they responded well. The defense played a lot better, and at the end of the day, when they needed to get stops, they did. There was really, that game was very comfortable for them in the second half. It wasn't a thing where they couldn't find a way to get a stop. When they needed to get off the field, they did.
Yeah, they gave up 7 points in the first 2 minutes and then 10 points in the last 58 minutes. So I guess that represents progress. One of the questions, I mean, there was a lot of turnover on the Ohio State defense this year. One of the spots was at corner where they lost Jeff Okudah, they lost Damon Arnett. It sounded like you came away pretty impressed with one of the guys, the new starters, Seven Banks.
Yeah, and like that's some of that's carryover from the spring. That limited action we saw, he just looks so good. He's transformed his body, looks confident now. Getting a little bit of experience last year. He popped like that's how it was on Saturday. It's not so much like maybe the steady consistency that you got out of Jeff Okudah last year or something like that, but it just every quarter or two he does something, you're like, oh, that was impressive, and it just he's a guy I think is going to be one of their breakout guys. I think just been hearing so much great stuff about him all off season, and you see him making a great play there on the scoop and score, and with his size and length and athleticism, why not him for like the next first round pick out of Ohio State corner? Obviously Shaun Wade's going to be one, but after Shaun, I mean, why not Seven Banks as a guy who gets into the first round at some point? I think he's going to be one of their breakout guys this year.
There was a lot of attention put on that corner position because they lost a couple first round guys in Arnett and Okudah. One of the spots that got a lot less attention, but was probably as big a question, was safety, where Jordan Fuller was a much lower NFL draft pick. And spoiler alert, turning out he probably should have been a little bit of a higher NFL draft pick, but that's an NFL problem, not an Ohio State problem. How do you think the coaching staff should be feeling right now about Marcus Hooker and Josh Proctor, who are the guys who are going to be replacing Fuller at safety, heading into this weekend's game at Penn State?
Yeah, it's one of those things to me. I don't want to get too down on Marcus because it's just the first game and kind of what we just talked about with the defense being a little slow to start. I mean, I think everybody had some adjustments to make and some issues there at the beginning, but they both missed some plays. They both had some missed tackles, had some poor angles. But if you're gonna miss some, you got to make some too. And I think Josh did the better job of that. I think for some of the mistakes he made, he also made a few plays. And I didn't see much out of Marcus. I thought Josh played a better game on Saturday. We'll see what they say about it during the week. I don't know if the coaches will even really go down that path during the week. They'll probably just, we'll probably find out on Saturday when one of them plays more than the other. But, I'll be curious to see if they'd agree with that after watching the film this week. But Josh to me was more noticeable. He is the bigger, more imposing, athletic guy. I mean, Marcus, I think the MO there has been that Marcus is the less risky guy who's going to be in the right position and do the right things. But I don't know. I kind of like Josh's upside there a little bit more, but we'll see what happens. Regardless, both of them do have to clean things up with the tackling.
One person that didn't have a whole lot to clean up after Saturday, Justin Fields, 20 for 21, and the only incompletion was a bomb to Chris Olave that hit him in the hands in the end zone and then got jostled loose by a big hit. It is quite literally pretty close to perfection. Just how good can Justin Fields be this year?
He can win the Heisman. I know people kind of don't feel that way just because of the late start they're getting. And, Trevor Lawrence and some of those guys have got this big advantage in terms of this head start they're getting. And they're able to, put some stuff out there first and kind of, build up that momentum, I guess you would say, with the voters. But performances like the one we saw on Saturday, that's Heisman stuff. I mean, he was essentially perfect. Actually, I thought, if you ask Chris Olave, I think he would tell you he should have caught the touchdown. That just the ground jarred it out when he hit the ground. But I think Chris would tell you he should have held on to that, or he would have expected himself to hang on to that. The only decision and throw I didn't like on Saturday was the one that he went hot and high on Ruckert, and there was a pass interference call on the play, and it was a pretty violent collision there with two Nebraska guys, and that was the only one I was like, he probably should have checked down on that. But he was fantastic, and if he starts running a little bit more, especially in these bigger games where the games are in doubt, or bigger stage against Penn State or Michigan or whatever. I think he can put in a Heisman season. I do. I know that's probably, sure, Homer or whatever, but I think it's that type of setup for him this year because he's going to put up the numbers.
I don't think that many people can question you picking a guy who was a Heisman finalist last year, who's 20 for 21 this year.
I know.
I don't think you can get dogged for being a homer too much for suggesting that might be at least plausible this year.
Yep.
There is one game down, 8 more to go before college football playoff selection Sunday. And there's an incredible amount of content at Buckeye Scoop from this weekend. I wrote about the surprising return of Haskell Garrett from a very scary situation a couple months ago. And then on Saturday, making one of the biggest plays of the game. And also about what it was like in and around Ohio Stadium for the game with the smallest crowd since probably the 1890s. That was surreal is the word I keep thinking back, thinking back at it. Several of the players and coaches just used the word weird, which, yeah, that too. So you can read all about that, have videos from inside the stadium, outside the stadium. There were not a whole lot of people there, which means you were probably not there. So if you want to see what it was like for the 2020 Ohio State football game day experience, you can find that at Buckeye Scoop. Marc had a great piece tracking everything that happened during the Buckeye Bash. As we mentioned, only guy who was there. So that's the only place you can find it is at Buckeye Scoop, plus his 10 observations piece that we talked about. Tony Girdman had a full recap of the game, plus a feature on Garrett Wilson, he sure looks like he's on a rocket ship to superstardom right now. I don't want to oversell that, but I think the move to H is working out okay for him so far. Bill Green had a bank blog with his thoughts on the game, as well as where things stand on the college football playoff picture right now. We had a post-game instant reaction episode of the Buckeye Weekly podcast with Tony and I. Most of that is free content outside the paywall, so go to buckeyescoop.com to check those out right now. But with a massive game at Penn State looming this weekend, you're probably going to want every piece of content you can get your hands on. So make this the week you join Buckeye Scoop. You're going to get great content like that every week this season. We are headed to Happy Valley this weekend. We'll have a ton of coverage, both pre and post game from there. Just as we were recording, got notified there's a very limited number of seats in that press box. Tony Girdman will be in the press box. Tony Girdman will be there at the game on Saturday. That is not something that I think everyone is going to get access to. So you can get everything that Tony is seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, whatever, inside Beaver Stadium on Saturday. You can get that all at buckeyescoop.com. Sign up for a membership today. And I think on Saturday you saw this could be a pretty good Ohio State team shaping up to a pretty good season. Might be a good time to really dive in head first with a membership at buckeyescoop.com. And also make sure you check out all of our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of those. You can subscribe to all of our shows right there. Also, please leave us a 5-star rating and review while you're at it. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.